The day my brothers threw me out of my father's funeral, more than 200 people stood there and watched without saying a word. Business leaders, politicians, family friends, and employees of Bennett Estates filled the old stone church overlooking California's Napa Valley. My father had spent 40 years building one of the most successful wineries in the country, and everyone had come to say goodbye. Everyone except me. At least that's what my brothers wanted. My name is Olivia Bennett. I was 34 years old, and for the last 10 years I had lived quietly in Seattle after leaving my family's business behind. People believed I had abandoned my father. The truth was far more complicated. I hadn't spoken publicly about what happened because he asked me not to. One day, he told me before I left, the truth will matter more than anyone's opinion. I trusted him enough to wait. I just never imagined that day would begin at his funeral. As I walked toward the church carrying a bouquet of white lilies, I saw my two older brothers greeting guests at the entrance. Andrew, the oldest, wore an expensive black suit and the expression of a man who already believed everything belonged to him. Beside him stood Matthew, shaking hands with investors as if the funeral were another business meeting. The moment Andrew noticed me, his smile disappeared. He walked down the church steps until we stood face to face. "You actually came," he said coldly. "He's still my father." He laughed quietly. "Not for the last 10 years. Without another word, he grabbed the bouquet from my hands and tossed it into a nearby trash bin. Several guests gasped. Matthew crossed his arms but didn't stop him. Andrew looked toward two security guards standing near the entrance. "Escort her off the property." Neither guard moved. They both recognized me. One of them had worked at Bennett Estates since I was a teenager. He looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Bennett," he said carefully. "She's family." Andrew's voice became louder. "Not anymore." People had begun taking out their phones. I remained calm. I wasn't going to argue at my father's funeral. I simply turned toward the parking lot and started walking away. Before I reached my car, the sound of tires rolling over gravel echoed across the church courtyard. A black Rolls-Royce stopped beside the entrance. Every conversation instantly died. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. An elderly man in a dark navy suit slowly emerged, carrying a worn leather briefcase. I recognized him immediately. George Hamilton, my father's personal attorney for more than 30 years. He looked first at my brothers, then at me standing outside the gates. His expression hardened. "Why," he asked loud enough for everyone to hear, "is Mr. Bennett's daughter standing outside her own father's funeral?" Andrew stepped forward confidently. "Because she isn't part of this family anymore." George stared at him for several long seconds before calmly opening his briefcase. He removed a sealed envelope bearing my father's signature across the front. Then he looked directly at my brothers. "I'm afraid," he said quietly, "your father expected this to happen." George held the sealed envelope in his hands, but made no attempt to open it. Instead, he looked at Andrew and Matthew with the same calm expression I remembered from my childhood. "Your father gave me very specific instructions," he said. If Olivia was prevented from attending his funeral, this letter was to be read immediately, before the service began. A wave of whispers spread through the crowd. Andrew forced a smile. "This isn't the place for legal matters." George shook his head. "According to your father, this is exactly the place." He carefully broke the wax seal and unfolded the handwritten letter. Even from several feet away, I recognized my father's handwriting. George cleared his throat and began reading. "Asterisk, if you're hearing these words, then my greatest fear has come true. My children are no longer standing together. If Andrew or Matthew have tried to keep Olivia away today, understand one thing before anyone says another word. She did not leave this family because she stopped loving us. She left because I asked her to." Asterisk, the church courtyard fell completely silent. Andrew's confident expression disappeared. Matthew looked at him in confusion. George continued reading. Asterisk 10 years ago, I discovered something inside Bennett Estates that threatened everything our family had built. I asked Olivia to leave publicly so nobody would suspect she was still helping me uncover the truth. She sacrificed her reputation because I asked her to trust me. Asterisk I closed my eyes for a moment. Those words brought me back to the night my father stood in his office, placed his hand on my shoulder, and told me that one day everyone would hate me. Until they finally understood why. Andrew suddenly stepped forward. That's enough. George calmly folded the letter before looking directly at him. No. His voice remained polite, but it carried enough authority that nobody interrupted again. Your father also left one final instruction. He opened his briefcase once more and removed a thick leather folder stamped with the Bennett Estates corporate seal. This document is to be presented only if Olivia returns. Andrew laughed nervously. You're making this sound like some kind of movie. George didn't react. He simply opened the folder and placed the first page where everyone could see it. At the top was a single title in bold letters, *** confidential internal investigation. ** below it was my father's signature, and mine. Andrew's smile disappeared. Matthew slowly leaned forward to read the next page. George looked at both of them before quietly saying the words that changed the atmosphere completely. For the last 10 years, your father wasn't investigating strangers. He paused, then looked directly into Andrew's eyes. He was investigating someone inside this family. Nobody spoke after George's words. The silence was so complete that I could hear the wind moving through the vineyards behind the church. Andrew looked at the investigation file as though it were about someone else. Then he laughed. You're accusing us because of a folder. George calmly shook his head. No. He removed another document. I'm accusing no one. He looked directly at the guests gathered around us. Your father spent 10 years collecting evidence. He believed facts speak louder than accusations. Andrew reached for the file, but George closed it before he could touch it. These documents belong to Olivia now. Matthew finally stepped forward. Our father never trusted her more than us. George's expression didn't change. Actually, he did. He opened another envelope and removed a notarized document signed 7 years earlier. This is the voting trust agreement for Bennett Estates. Andrew frowned. I've never seen that. No, George replied. Because your father never wanted you to. I accepted the papers and slowly read the first page. Every major decision involving the winery, the vineyards, or the family trust required my written approval. The agreement had remained hidden until the day of my father's funeral. Suddenly, the last 10 years made perfect sense. I hadn't disappeared because my father no longer trusted me. I had disappeared because he trusted me more than anyone else. Andrew's confidence vanished. That's impossible. George looked at him calmly. No. What's impossible is what happened to nearly $60 million over the last 8 years. Every head turned toward my brothers. Matthew immediately shook his head. What money? George opened the investigation file and placed several financial reports on the hood of the Rolls-Royce so everyone could see them. Bennett Estates reported record profits almost every year. He pointed to the balance sheets. But according to independent auditors hired by your father, millions disappeared through consulting contracts, equipment purchases, and vineyard expansion projects that were never completed. One of the investors stepped closer to examine the reports. His expression changed almost instantly. These companies, he whispered, I've never heard of them. George nodded. Neither had your father. Then he pulled out one final page. It listed dozens of payments made to the same private holding company. At the bottom of the page was a single signature authorizing every transfer. Andrew looked down, and all the color drained from his face. Because the signature wasn't mine. It wasn't my father's. It was his own. Andrew stared at the signature as if it might disappear if he looked at it long enough. "That document is fake," he finally said. George didn't respond immediately. Instead, he handed the page to one of the investors standing nearby. The man adjusted his glasses, compared the signature with several older corporate reports on his tablet, and slowly looked back at Andrew. "It's identical." Matthew stepped forward, clearly shaken. "Andrew, tell me this isn't real." Andrew ignored him. His eyes never left George. "You've been planning this for years." George calmly closed the investigation file. "No. Your father was." He looked at me before continuing. "Robert Bennett instructed me never to reveal these documents unless he was gone. He believed the truth would only matter when he could no longer protect his children himself." For several seconds, nobody moved. Then the sound of approaching vehicles echoed through the vineyard. 3 black SUVs drove through the front gates and stopped beside the church. Their doors opened almost simultaneously. Men and women in business suits stepped out carrying leather portfolios. I recognized every face. The board of directors of Bennett Estates. None of them had been expected until Monday's shareholder meeting. The chairwoman of the board, Elena Price, walked directly toward George before turning to me. "Miss Bennett," she said respectfully, "your father asked us to attend the funeral if Mr. Hamilton contacted us." George nodded once. "It's time." Elena opened her portfolio and removed a sealed board resolution. "Yesterday morning, before Mr. Bennett passed away, he activated an emergency governance clause written into the company's bylaws 12 years ago." Andrew frowned. "What clause?" Elena looked directly at him. "In the event credible evidence of executive fraud exists, every executive officer immediately loses financial authority until an independent investigation is completed." Andrew's expression changed instantly. "You can't do that." "Actually," Elena replied, "we already have." She handed copies of the resolution to every board member standing behind her. As of 9 o'clock this morning, every Bennett Estates bank account has been frozen. Every corporate credit line has been suspended. Every executive transaction requires unanimous board approval. Matthew looked at his brother in disbelief. "You told me everything was under control." Andrew didn't answer. At that exact moment, his phone vibrated. He looked at the screen, and all the color disappeared from his face. It was a notification from the company's bank. *** access denied. Executive authority revoked. ***. Andrew looked at the notification for several seconds before locking his phone and slipping it into his pocket. "This proves nothing," he said, trying to sound calm. "Freezing the accounts doesn't mean anyone stole money." Elena folded her hands. "You're right." She glanced at George. "That's why we asked forensic accountants to finish your father's investigation after his death." George opened another folder from the briefcase and removed a thick financial report. It was completed at 6 o'clock this morning. He handed the first page to me. Across the top, in bold letters, were the words, ***, confidential forensic audit. ***. I turned the page. Every transfer my father had questioned was listed in perfect detail. Dates. Wire confirmations. Shell companies. Offshore accounts. One payment after another. The total at the bottom made my heart stop. $61,842,000. Matthew stepped beside me and stared at the report. $61 million. He whispered. "Where did it go?" George calmly pointed to the final page. "That's what your father wanted to know." Just then, another black sedan pulled into the church parking lot. A woman in a gray business suit stepped out carrying a silver laptop case. George smiled slightly. Right on time. She introduced herself as Lisa Monroe, the lead forensic accountant hired by my father almost 3 years earlier. Without wasting a second, She opened her laptop on the hood of the Rolls-Royce and connected it to a portable monitor. A detailed financial chart appeared on the screen. Every missing dollar had moved through the same chain of companies before disappearing into a single private account in the Cayman Islands. Lisa zoomed in on the final transfer. "This," she said, "is where the money stopped moving." Andrew crossed his arms. "Whose account is it?" Lisa typed a password, opened one final document, and quietly answered, "That's the interesting part." She looked at me before turning the screen toward everyone standing in the courtyard. The account wasn't registered to Andrew. It wasn't registered to Matthew. It wasn't registered to Bennett Estates. It belonged to a company created 12 years earlier. The same year my father asked me to leave home. The company had only one listed owner. *** Olivia Bennett. *** Every person in the courtyard turned toward me. I could feel hundreds of eyes waiting for an explanation I didn't have. Even I was staring at the screen in disbelief. "That's impossible," I said quietly. "I've never opened a company in the Cayman Islands." Lisa nodded. "We know." She clicked another file. "Because the company wasn't created by you. It was created for you." Confused whispers spread through the crowd. Andrew immediately pointed at the monitor. "There it is. Her name is on the account." George calmly stepped between us. "Finish the report, Lisa." She opened the incorporation documents. Every legal filing listed me as the beneficial owner, but every signature had been forged. Then she displayed another page. The company's registered mailing address wasn't in the Cayman Islands at all. It was a small law office in Napa that had closed almost 9 years earlier. George smiled for the first time that day. "Exactly where your father wanted them to make their mistake." I looked at him. He knew. George nodded. Robert Bennett discovered the fake company almost 10 years ago. He could have reported it immediately, but he realized whoever created it would simply disappear. Instead, he let them believe their plan was working while he quietly collected evidence. The reason he asked you to leave wasn't to protect the business. It was to protect you. If the fraud was ever exposed, your name would be the first one investigators found. He wanted you far away before that day came. Andrew's confidence finally disappeared. Sweat formed on his forehead as Lisa opened one last document recovered from my father's private office. It wasn't another financial report. It was a hidden surveillance log. Over the last 8 years, my father had secretly photographed every person who entered his private records room after business hours. Hundreds of timestamps filled the screen. Employees, lawyers, executives, accountants. Then Lisa stopped on one particular night. The security image showed someone standing in front of the company's safe at 2:17 a.m. The face was perfectly clear. It wasn't me. It wasn't Matthew. It wasn't even Andrew. The entire crowd gasped. Andrew slowly turned toward the man standing beside him. Matthew's face had gone completely white. "No." Andrew whispered, "Tell me this isn't true." Matthew took one step backward, then another. Without saying a single word, he turned and ran toward the parking lot. Matthew ran before anyone could react. He sprinted across the church courtyard toward his black SUV, pushing past guests and nearly knocking over one of the flower arrangements. 2 security guards immediately chased after him, while several board members stood frozen in disbelief. Andrew shouted his brother's name, but Matthew never looked back. He jumped into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and started the engine. The tires screamed against the gravel as the SUV shot toward the front gate. It almost made it. At that exact moment, 2 California Highway Patrol vehicles blocked the exit. Matthew slammed on the brakes, but there was nowhere left to go. Within seconds, officers surrounded the vehicle with their weapons drawn. He slowly stepped out with his hands in the air. I watched from the church steps, unable to believe the brother I had grown up with was now being handcuffed in front of our father's funeral. George quietly stood beside me. Your father hoped it would never come to this. I swallowed hard. So did I. A detective walked over holding a search warrant. We searched Mr. Matthew Bennett's office this morning under authorization from the board. He opened a large evidence box and removed several binders, a laptop, and multiple external hard drives. Lisa immediately connected one of the drives to her computer. Hundreds of financial records appeared on the screen. Hidden ledgers, secret bank accounts, internal emails. Then she opened a folder labeled **personal**. Inside was a video recorded only 4 nights earlier. Matthew appeared alone in his office, speaking directly into the camera. His face looked exhausted. If you're watching this, he began, then everything has fallen apart. He paused before continuing. Andrew doesn't know the whole truth. He believes the missing money belongs to us. It doesn't. We were laundering it for someone else. A stunned silence spread through the courtyard. Even Andrew looked completely confused. Matthew continued speaking on the screen. We were told that if we refused, our family would be destroyed. He lowered his head for several seconds before saying the words nobody expected to hear. The person behind everything has been sitting on the Bennett Estates board of directors for the last 12 years. Slowly, every member of the board turned to look at one another. Nobody moved. The silence in the church courtyard felt heavier than anything I had ever experienced. Every member of the board looked at the others, wondering who among them had spent more than a decade stealing from my father's company. Andrew stared at the laptop in complete disbelief. He's lying, he whispered. Matthew's trying to save himself. Lisa didn't answer. She simply pressed play again. Matthew looked directly into the camera. If you're seeing this, I'm probably already under arrest. I deserve it. I signed documents I should never have signed. I moved money I knew didn't belong to us. But I wasn't the one who started this. He reached into a drawer and placed a thick red folder on the desk. Everything is in here. Every transfer, every meeting, every payment. My father knew who was responsible 2 years ago. He was waiting for enough evidence to make sure nobody escaped. Matthew looked down before saying one final sentence. Olivia, I'm sorry. Dad was right to trust you instead of me. The video ended. Nobody spoke. George slowly opened the red folder that detectives had recovered from Matthew's office only an hour earlier. Inside were signed contracts, offshore banking records, secret meeting schedules, and photographs taken over several years. Then he reached the last page. It wasn't a financial document. It was a letter written by my father only 3 days before he died. George read it aloud. **, if this letter is being read, then my investigation is finally over. The person responsible for betraying our family sat at my table, attended every board meeting, and shook my hand while stealing from the people who trusted us. Olivia. I know you never wanted this responsibility, but I'm asking you one last time to finish what I started. **, George quietly turned the final page toward everyone standing in the courtyard. Attached to it was a recent photograph, a full legal name, copies of wire transfers, and a signed confession from one former executive. The detective looked at the page only once before immediately turning toward one of the board members standing near the back of the crowd. Don't move. The man froze. Eleanor slowly closed her eyes. I never thought it would be you. The director tried to step away, but 2 detectives were already beside him. As they placed him in handcuffs, he looked directly at me and smiled. Your father was smarter than I expected, he said quietly. But not smart enough to save himself. George looked him in the eyes before answering with absolute calm, no. He closed the folder. He was smart enough to save his daughter, his company, and his legacy. As the detectives escorted the former director away, every employee of Bennett Estates turned toward me. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't the daughter who had abandoned the family anymore. I was the daughter my father had trusted to bring it back together. ***, the end. ***.